everyone. As most of you guys know, I'm Colin. I'll be the moderator for this, the loosest sense of the word. Generally, I'll be making sure that the discussion goes as smoothly by introducing the topics as it goes on and making sure each of you guys don't hog or interrupt each other during the discussion. And so I guess we'll start off with the first topic, which is the evidence on evolution. So I think our guest should first go.
Oh, well, I mean, okay. I mean, the evidence is pretty clear for evolution. I mean, the scientific consensus is on my side about it. I would say if I had to point to one really good piece of evidence for evolution, that would be the fossil record. It clearly shows the progression from one species to another, and this shows an evolutionary, path to a single original ancestor. So I think the fossil record is good. I think genetics is also a really good piece of evidence for evolution. Specifically, if you wanted to look at proof of human evolution, you would want to look in chromosome 2, because chromosome 2 shows a distinct fusion between two separate chromosomes that exist in our other ape ancestors, and these two chromosomes fuse together, and that's what differentiates us from the other apes. That's one piece of evidence. I don't know. It might be better if I heard some specific claims against evolution that I can potentially explain for the other side.
So I guess I'd start out with a few things. I'd like to say I do believe in change over time, and I do believe in microevolutions. I do believe in variations of a kind. That's some simple things. Only the most radical of creationists, and I've never actually met one, but I've heard that there are people who deny those. I'm not one of those people. I am of a different camp, of a different ilk. I would like to say, though, that I do have a few problems specifically with human evolution, but one of the main ones is that during the Cambrian period, during the Cambrian explosion, we actually got 20 of the 36 major body plans, which is interesting to me because they didn't actually have a progenitor. Is that if we look in the fossil record, there is actually, we can't see a buildup to the different body plans in the Cambrian explosion. This is something that even, Stephen Meyer was talking about it, but Darwin actually talked about it as well. He was confused by it because he thought that his theory, this required the body plans of the Cambrian explosion for us to find a fossil record of them. As of today, we have not actually found a fossil record of these body types leading up to the Cambrian explosion. They just seem to have sort of popped up into existence. Some of the other things is that some of our organs, some of the human organs, have an irreversible complexity. Is that they always must have functioned in their current environment. They cannot be made more simple. Things like the kidneys, part of like the brain. I have a few more of them. I mean, I don't believe in molecules to man evolution, basically. That's basically what I'm crumbling it down to. I mean, there's all sorts of things we can talk about. We can talk about Lucy. We can talk about normal skulls that have been found in layers of rock that date 212 million years ago. There are all these sorts of strange little inconsistencies that I believe function in the theory of evolution. And I guess we will address those here tonight. Specifically, I guess I'll try to harp on more human evolution because that seems to be a realm where there's more known and it's obviously more studied.
Okay, well, as far as the Cambrian explosion goes, I don't see how that is evidence against evolution. I get that you think that there's this perfect record out there of the fossils, and I mean, you even brought up Darwin, but I mean, Darwin, he predicted that we would find transitional fossils. We did find transitional fossils. We found several transitional. In fact, every single fossil is a transitional fossil from one species to another. So I guess I don't understand your point in bringing up the different body plans that were found in the Cambrian explosion. Just because we don't have any kind of record of them beforehand does not automatically mean that some other supernatural explanation is a better explanation than the natural explanation. I feel like what you have to do is not just say, "Oh, I have a problem with not finding body plans, that lead up to the Cambrian explosion," because fossils are, in fact, very hard to actually create. And so, I mean, you have to provide some other supernatural explanation, I guess, since you don't believe in what you're saying is molecules to man evolution. You have to bring up a solid supernatural thing that explains it better than the natural explanation.
So it's interesting here because I understand that the fossil process is very complicated, but it's also strange that we would have absolutely none, that we would have none from the pre-period, none before the Cambrian explosion that explains the Cambrian explosion itself. Additionally, I would like to point out that when we have something that is found, like a tree that goes through rock layers, that goes through millions and millions of years of rock, that's a little odd to explain to anybody. And if we're looking at
really
skulls, human skulls that we find that differ in age and things like that. I mean, we have at 1958, we have at the International Congress of Zoology, we have Dr. Alexander John Edward Cave explained that one of the most famous skulls found in Germany that was supposedly the first Neanderthal was actually that of an elderly man who suffered from arthritis. So we have these inconsistencies specifically in human evolution with the layers of human evolution. Specifically, one of the
It's not an inconsistency in evolution, though.
It is an inconsistency in the proof of evolution. It is an inconsistency.
No, it's not.
Why is it not?
Well, just because there is one mistakenly identified fossil or skeleton or anything like that, it does not disprove evolution on the whole. Since you're wanting to bring up bogus skeletal remains, you could point to Piltdown Man if you wanted to. The problem is that science has a mechanism within itself in order to correct bad information. Like with Piltdown Man, the scientific community is actually the one that are the ones that expose Piltdown Man for the fraud that it was. And even with your skeletal evidence that you're mentioning here, that of an arthritic old man, my guess is that science is also the one that uncovered the scientific community specifically uncovered the fact that it was an arthritic old man. I don't know what fossil you're talking about, but I don't see that as disproving the evolutionary theory on the whole, just because there's some misidentified bones.
Well, I don't think we can. I'm seeing something that you're doing here. I don't think we should divorce the scientific community from religious processes, because there are religious scientists. There have been religious scientists. There will continue to be religious scientists. So I wouldn't say that just because they were scientists, like, lumps them into a whole nother category, because we do have, we have atheist scientists and we have religious scientists. There are two different groups, but I think classifying the scientific community as a block is kind of strange, to say the least.
How is it strange to say the scientific community can right the wrongs of the scientific community? It doesn't matter whether or not a person in the scientific community is religious or not. It shouldn't matter to their scientific pursuits as to what their religious persuasion is. So I'm not trying. I actually didn't say anything about religion or anything like that in what I was saying. So I'm not actually like separating out between religion and science and all this other stuff. So I'm not exactly sure why you.
That was not about you specifically. That was just like, let's clarify here just before we get any further that, there are religious scientists, and that's a whole different topic that we could talk about later or whatever. But, it's also interesting to me that there are no vestigial organs on the human body. Up until
there are no. Can you give me an example?
There are none. There are no vestigial organs on the human body.
We
had some.
What's one commonly thought vestigial organ that we now know actually has or is not vestigial?
For example, the appendix. The appendix we thought was vestigial for quite a while, but now we know it's where healthy bacteria goes and falls back to during a time when there is a stomach infection or an outbreak of sorts within your digestive tract. We now know that good bacteria goes there to remain safe. We additionally know, some people have told me before, that the tailbone is vestigial. The tailbone is not vestigial, nor is it evidence that we had a tail, considering that we have 9 muscles that all connect to the tailbone. And if they weren't there, they wouldn't be able to anchor. I mean,
just because there have been uses that have been found after its original use, like just because an organ's been repurposed does not mean that it is not vestigial in the context of its original purpose. Like, for instance, a really good one is the whale. They actually have, a hip bone and hind leg bones that are vestigial today. Now, they have been useful in their current configuration, but just because they're useful now for different uses does not mean that they are not vestigial to their original use. So I'm not exactly sure about the appendix. I have seen some scientific studies done on the appendix saying that the exact thing that you said. But like, for instance, with the tailbone, just because there are muscles that are anchored around that area does not necessarily mean that it is not vestigial. It just means that some other purpose has arisen. I think that it is very much still a vestigial part of our body. What do you think about wisdom teeth? Are those not vestigial bones?
Well, first of all, I would like to address your use of the words vestigial, because vestigial itself means becoming functionless over the course of evolution. So I wouldn't say vestigial. I mean, there are clearly no, even by how you characterized it, there are no actual vestigial parts of the body. When it comes to wisdom teeth, something like that, I would say that's actually a noticeable microevolution. That's not a macroevolution. It's not a molecules to man evolution, because it is just simply an atrophy of our jawbone from having to ingest less meat. That's a microevolution.
So let's dispense with the whole idea that there's a difference between micro and macro evolution, because there's really no difference. Evolution is evolution. I get that a lot of you guys want to separate out macro evolution from micro evolution, but once you pile enough steps of micro evolution on, it becomes just macro evolution. So macro doesn't really matter. It's all evolution.
I would argue that there is a large difference between micro and macro. I mean, even in the use of the words micro and macro, there's a huge difference. But there can be changes and there can be improvements in God's creation, but they will never transform it completely into something else. We're not going to find, as I previously worded, we're not going to find the molecules to man. We're not going to find that, because that doesn't happen. We have a series of microevolutions that may create a change, or a noticeable change, such as when wisdom teeth, the atrophying down. But we also know this. I've seen many computer simulations run of evolution, it's quite actually bolstered evolution, because they give them, to begin with, they give them a moving part that they can begin with, and using technology and large computers to simulate evolution. And I believe one simulation I thought got out to 10,000 generations, and they still couldn't get something that walked in a straight line. The amount of time, the amount of sheer randomness that we would have to have, at least in my configuration of things, if we have a painting, which is the creation of Earth, we need to have a painter. The chances that randomness are just going to all come together and create this kind of, the magnificent beauty that is our world and is our natural, go to the Grand Canyon. I have a hard time believing, or any rational.
The Grand Canyon was... Well, see, the Grand Canyon was carved through millions of years of water erosion. And just because we perceive it to be beautiful does not mean that it is some kind of absolute or objectively beautiful thing. That's very much a subjective experience. We all have different things that we consider to be beautiful. So just pointing to the trees and saying, look at the trees, is not a very compelling argument. The teleological argument has a lot of different flaws in it. For one thing, we have natural processes to explain how different organisms came to be and different plant life came to be. We have natural processes that explain why organisms function the way that they do now. And we have natural processes to explain the diversity of life that appears here on Earth. I get that happenstance or just accident, if you will, is not convincing to you, but when you consider how like when you consider how nature functions and how organisms function, they're very clearly just shaped by nature and not by a god. Now earlier you were talking about how there's no examples of large changes in organisms over time, right? There's no evidence for the macroevolution that you're talking about, right? That's what you said?
Yeah, there's no evidence for the molecules to man type evolution.
Well, okay. So, well, now we need to be very specific here, because you're never going to find any like piece of evidence that goes from molecules all the way to man. Like that is a huge, like that is a huge window to talk about, right?
Yeah, I understand that's a large window.
If you want a good example,
extraordinary, you're going to need extraordinary evidence.
Oh, that's funny from somebody that believes in God. But if you just look at whale evolution, you will very plainly see evidence of macroevolution. Whales started out as land quadrupeds, and then they changed environments, and slowly over millions and millions of years they became these very huge animals that live in the sea, that lost their hind legs, and their front legs changed into flippers, and they learned to breathe somewhat differently. That's a clear indication of this macroevolution that you say doesn't actually happen.
So that's something to talk about, but I think that's part of the reason where we're going to have a major sticking point, because I do not believe that the pelvis of the whale in any form is vestigial. Whales are whales. Perhaps they were smaller at one point. Perhaps they were bigger at one point. We have evidence here. Now, I'd actually ask a question of you: do you believe that all species are undergoing or undergo evolution?
Yes.
So that's interesting to me, because I remember back in the, well, I don't remember, but back in the day when there was a large inland sea across Middle America, and Tyleosaur roamed the seas, tuna were almost exactly as the same as they are now.
Okay. I don't understand your point in this.
But my point is that how through a similar period of time could basically a glorified porpoise, is what you're saying the whale used to be. I mean, I've got to simplify it down. So a whale version of a porpoise became the modern version of a whale. And over the same time, the tuna decided it would be most beneficial to stay a tuna.
I'm wondering, can you steelman the evolutionary theory?
Can I what?
Steelman. Have you not heard that term before?
I've not.
Oh, okay. No. It's it's the exact opposite of a straw man. It's where you try to recite the whatever principle, whatever concept, you try to recite it in the way that the other person understands it. I guess you're trying to, steel man it. You're instead of building it out of straw, you're going to build it out of steel, so that it's exactly as, it's exactly as the evolutionary theory is described.
Actually, I've never heard that expression before, but I guess I'll start using it from now on. But when it comes to evolution itself,
yes.
Well, I think wait, you want me to come up with a stronger argument for evolution?
No. I'm wanting you to explain evolution to me.
Oh, so if I was to explain what people believe in evolution, I would say that people believe that it is a series of small changes that occur among species, genetic variation through crossing over that occurs over millions of years or X amount of time, depending on the species and who one asks about it, that culminates to form not a final form, but a modern form or current form.
That's pretty decent, with the exception that the environment shapes the organism. So, and the organism changes so that it can best survive in the environment that it's in. So if tuna was was shaped in a way that promotes survivability in whatever environment that it's in, then I would expect it not to change all that much over a long period of time. Whereas if you have another organism that changes environments, or the environment around it changes, then it would change along with the environment in order for them to survive. I know a lot of people misunderstand the survival of the fittest. Fittest doesn't always mean, the mightiest or the strongest. It's whichever one can survive. Yeah. Right. And so if it would not surprise me if the tuna fish did not change all that much. I mean, you got crocodiles that they've been around for millions of years, and they've changed very little. Sharks are another good one. They've changed very little, but it's all because they're in their, like they've reached a very survivable form, just biological structure, I guess. Evolution is just the change in organisms over a long period of time. And if you get to a point where the organism can't survive in the environment and propagate itself, then you're not really going to find a lot of change going on. There's still some changes. There's just not a lot of change going on.
But you are not suggesting that all animals, I mean, I know you're not suggesting this, that all animals would evolve themselves out of little binds, as it were.
They wouldn't evolve themselves out of what?
Well, they wouldn't evolve themselves out of little bottlenecks, because it seems that the way you were describing it, that the whale would somehow know that it's in danger, or its body would know that it's in danger, or certain whales would die out based, I guess, pre-whales, based on that, and then start heading genetically in a different direction.
Well, that's what I mean by they would be shaped by their environment. Whatever form, whatever function allowed them to survive in their environment, that would be propagated amongst the group of organisms, and they would proceed to change. I feel like you're anthropomorphizing animals and organisms just a little bit here, with them reacting to the changes, like them consciously reacting to the changes in their environment, instead of the changes in their environment causing them to change in different ways, not consciously.
I mean, yes, if I did believe in evolution, I wouldn't believe it to be a cognitive change, but it seems like to be heading in a certain direction, because it is heading in a certain direction. If evolution is moving, it's heading in a certain direction. It's headed not towards an end goal, but it's headed towards the next thing, sort of. So,
well, like I pointed out before, the whole purpose is survivability. So whatever direction is most survivable is the direction the group of organisms would head in, just because it's the survivable direction.
I would still question, though, because on that topic of, we were talking about fossils earlier. I still don't have a reason nor any evidence against because Darwin even said that he wanted to find the fossils before the Cambrian explosion to explain 20 of the 36 body plans coming through that time. And so I'm not right at this point going to say, I would just ask you to defend it. I'm not going to put out down right now and say something supernatural. And I don't agree with that characterization of the Almighty. I don't agree with the characterization of supernatural, or because it puts him in the category of superstition. But then what would your explanation be for the reason that these 20 body plans, the 20 major body plans, pop out of the Cambrian explosion with no fossil record? What is the explanation for that?
Well, fossils are kind of hard to are hard to make. They're even harder to preserve over long periods of time, like we find. And just because we don't have any fossil record prior to the Cambrian explosion for these 26 body plans does not mean that there were not organisms that existed that just either did not, their fossils didn't survive due to some natural occurrence, like natural disaster or something like that, or other means. But the fact is that we do have fossils prior to the Cambrian explosion. I mean, we know the kinds of life forms that existed prior to the Cambrian explosion, and we do have fossils of those life forms. So, I mean, I guess I don't really have a problem with the Cambrian explosion happening and us not having, previous body plans in the fossil record, because we do have fossils prior to that point. Like we have fossils around it, and we can draw the connecting dots. So I don't really see the problem with that.
You don't have an issue taking that leap of faith and just assuming that they're
It's
there.
not faith.
Well, it's faith that they're there because you don't have proof that they're there, but you believe that they're there.
Did I say that they're there? Like,
do you believe that they are there?
Well, I believe the organisms existed. There were organisms in between, but I didn't say that there were fossils. I don't know if they were fossils.
I'm asking you is if you believe in those in-betweener species that would have to form the bridge between the period far before the Cambrian explosion and the body plans leading up to the Cambrian explosion?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not a leap of faith, though. That's just logic.
It's not necessarily. It seems to be a extrapolation. Because it's saying for this to be here later and this is here before, we must extrapolate that this is the in-betweener.
How is an extrapolation faith?
Because it is a believing that something is there.
Well, I mean, I'm using the logic of this is how evolution works and happens. And so if you trace it back, even if we don't have the fossils there to physically show that they existed there, we know that there had to be organisms that existed at that point.
And you know that based off of the extrapolation from finding all the previous ones.
Well, from the extrapolation of we have fossils here and we have fossils here. Just because we don't have fossils here doesn't mean that just nothing happened in that space. Something happened. Organisms still evolved.
But it's something quite
changed.
major. It's not like these fossils on this side were as big as the fossils, or not as big, by big I mean important, as fossils on this side. We have the 20 major body plans coming into existence.
Okay. Well,
20 out of 36 major body plans coming into existence.
So given what you know about evolution, what about evolution does not explain simpler organisms eventually evolving into more complex ones?
Well, that's not my question. My question is, how do we have proof that these 20 out of the 36 body plans evolved into existence when we do not have proof of them prior? And we have proof of them afterwards, and in this in-between blank space, we have something that we don't know what it is. That scientifically, there's no explanation.
Well, you see, this is something that's done all the time in I might get the field wrong, paleontology. Basically, I mean, there's gaps in the fossil record, but we can morphologically find the similarities between the two. So I guess why would that be a special situation compared to the rest of history that we know?
I would only say it's special because we have 20 out of the 36 major body plans as a result afterwards, yet we don't know the in-between. It's very difficult. It's additionally extrapolation. This is interesting. I don't know if this is in the field of paleontology versus evolutionary science or anything else, but extrapolation in many fields of mathematics and scientists is very much frowned upon for data or for anything else.
I mean, in the fossil record, extrapolate. Well, no. I mean, in science, you extrapolate all the time. I mean, you don't use that as definitive, like, evidence that, any certain, like there was any certain path between one body type and another. But I mean, we extrapolate all the time in science. So I don't see the big problem between, extrapolating in other parts of the fossil record and then this very uber special case here with the Cambrian explosion. It just seems like another gap that we may or may not fill in the future. But the fact is that if evolution naturally happened after the Cambrian explosion and it naturally happened before the Cambrian explosion, then it more than likely happened naturally in between those 2 points.
Okay, Gabe, I think we should go to the next topic.
All right.
Which is morality and atheism / Christianity.
Okay.
So, Gabe, you want to start out because John ended the last segment?
All right. So I will not take the position. I don't think atheists are immoral people. I don't think people who don't believe in God are immoral people. What I do believe is without the existence of God, you have a hard time justifying morality. There is no reason without the existence of a creator that I should not kill other people to get what I want. There is absolutely no reason. There's no justification, because if morality is not determined by the higher being, if it is not determined by the higher power, by the good, by the Almighty, by the good Lord, then it is either determined by society, then it is determined by what is around you. And I think if we have subjective morality of this type, we run amok in our society, because without the divine law, there is no law, there is no justice, there is no reason for justice. It can only be justified on God. You cannot justify morality without the existence of a higher being.
Okay, so I don't see how that's true, like whatsoever. Primarily because in Christianity itself, you have changing morality. Morality has changed all throughout time, especially within Christianity. I mean, if you go back 100 years, women weren't allowed to vote. Women were seen as, secondary in society, and that's due to religion. If you go back even farther to the Old Testament times, and even in New Testament times, women were seen as property. They were treated as property. God even commanded in the Old Testament, in the 10 Commandments, that women are property and they are to be treated as property. So it's a little hard for me to believe that we need God in order to have moral positions or moral justifications for things, or have morality in general, when the morality that you're claiming is absolute or grounded in this perfect objective being or transcendent being. I guess I just don't see how you can actually say that when so much in Christianity has changed. You talk about how without a God, you could just go and kill somebody just because you wanted to. And that's not actually true. I mean, not only have Christians used their Christianity, their religion, to justify the heinous murder of other people, whole groups of people, genocides. They've justified it with their religion. It's just something that somebody said. It's not even something that God has told them to do. It's just something that somebody said. Just because they wrote it down into a book and they said that God said it, that's apparently justification to kill somebody. That's all throughout the Old Testament, and that's all throughout the New Testament. That's all throughout history. I mean, what do you think the conquistadors were doing here in America? In Central America and in North America. I mean, the conquistadors. I'm not sure if they made it to North America, but definitely Central America. They were looking to spread Christianity, to force people to come to their religion or die. So I fail to see any kind of moral grounding in an absolute deity figure, or an absolute morality in a God figure, or absolute morality at all. It's all subjective, even within Christianity. It's subjective to the time, place, and society that you live in. It's subjective to the culture that you live in. Regardless of morality. No. There definitely is morality. We decide we decide our own individual moral codes. We have help from our parents, from society, and all that to help us form those moral codes. But we have this moral foundation that's just an emergent property of complex nervous systems. This is supported by the fact that there are many different organisms other than humans that seem to exhibit some primitive type of moral foundation. You can think of dogs, cats, dolphins, whales, other such animals like that. Animals with higher brain function seem to formulate this moral foundation, this moral code of behavior, and you can see that all over the animal kingdom.
All right, so I mean, number one, I believe you did assert that morality was determined by the society and by the people around them rather than having an objective standard, which, if you think about it, is actually horrifying. I would say that that's a horrifying notion that society around you determines your morality. For example, if I was a 12-year-old boy who lived in Nazi Austria, it would be considered an immoral action by the society for me to hide Jews in my ceiling. But I would say that that's objectively a moral thing to do. And I understand that there is, definitely shifts in morality. St. Augustine discusses them at length. But I think what we do have to understand is that just because there were Christians in the past who behaved immorally, and because some morality has changed, there have been some basic principles, especially through Christianity, that have always ridden through. And just because people misuse Christianity by directly misusing the Bible, and that's what we had the Protestant Reformation over, is that people, Luther could read Latin, and he was like, hey, you're not following this well at all. In fact, you're lying, you're adulterating, you're absorbing church money, you're misusing all this, you're not doing it right. So I think we have objective morality, and I think objective morality is printed on many of our hearts by the divine, because I think you and I both know that we can't go out in the street and kill someone for our own doing. And I think I think deep down, everyone in the world pretty much knows that thou shalt not kill. And additionally, to address a point you made earlier, I would say that it's completely false to say that in the 10 Commandments, it asserts that women are property.
Yes, it definitely says that. I'll bring it up.
It doesn't say that.
It does say that. Hold on. Here, I'll hold on. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I will bring it up right now. Let me get the actual Bible verse, not the Wikipedia entry.
All right, but I'm just telling you, I just Control F'd it. The word property appears about 0 times in the actual.
No, you're taking that a little bit too literally. So it's Exodus.
Property says property.
No. Okay. So Exodus 20:17, you shall not cover your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant or slave,
No,
his
it doesn't
ox
say slave.
or
What version are you
donkey.
reading?
No. Well, this is the NIV version, but the servant, male or female servant is slave. His ox or donkey, anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is do not covet your neighbor's belongings, which includes wife and servants or slaves.
I think that I just like to address that, and it's very clear. I mean, I don't know what the NIV says, but the AKJV, the Authorized King James Version, doesn't say that. And I think we also know, I think there's a great deal of mishistoriosity around nor his manservant nor his maidservant. We have to remember that Jacob, Israel, served under his uncle as a servant for 14 years. That doesn't mean he was enslaved by his uncle. That means he worked for his uncle.
Right.
So I'm still again on my point here, but he worked there for 14 years so he could marry. Okay, that's whatever. Okay, so then we have something else there. It doesn't say possessions in the version of the Bible that I read, in the version of the Bible that is very widely subscribed to, nor in the Dewey Rhymes version, which is the official Catholic version that is used by the majority of Christians in the world, because the majority of Christians in the world are Catholic. Many Protestants use the AKJV. So we have nor his manservant nor his maidservant, nor anything that is thy neighbor. So it doesn't say that it's a possession of thy neighbors. It means who is a possession. It says nor anything that is of thy neighbors, which is anything that is in thy neighbor's presence, anything that is with thy neighbor.
Anything owned by your neighbor, including women.
It says anything that is thy neighbor's.
Right.
So
if I say that that microphone is yours, does not imply possession.
So I think that there's different words to it, and we have a lot of different parts of the Bible. But I think we have in here, we don't have it implying that that his wife belongs to the man. I think what we have there is an implication that it is the man's to protect. And yes, that of course would be the belief of the time.
No, you're importing things into it. This is poor exegesis right here, is what that is.
It's not poor exegesis, because if there's only one example of something, And
No. It's all over the Old Testament, citing women as property. I mean, with Jacob or Israel, why was he working for the father?
Well, the daughters actually wanted to marry him, but he was not seen as worthy. He needed to prove himself to.
Where in there did it ask the daughters if they wanted to marry him? He was just like, oh, hey, look, she's cute. I want her. I'm going to work for you for 7 years. And then the father pulls a fast one, gives him the wrong girl. And then he's like, oh, crap, I slept with the wrong daughter. So now I've got to work another 7 years to buy another daughter. We have two
things there. One of them is that is a story about society that is not involving God, which means that is just what the practice was at the time. So we have there that being the practice at the time. Just because something is in the Bible and it's not from directly the words of God or the finger of God, then it is a story, is an example of a story of something that happened. So just because, rape and murder happens in the Bible doesn't mean God condones rape and murder. We have examples of God
he definitely does command rape and murder.
We have examples of God telling stories in the Bible, of God showing stories in the Bible or historical events many times. And where he says, don't do that. What that person did was wrong and he shall be punished for it.
No. In Numbers 31, God directly commands Moses to have all the Israelites go and genocide an entire group of people and then take the young women who have not slept with a man as their sexual slaves. So, I mean, you can't get away with God with the idea that God is just like telling stories or whatnot. If this was not okayed by God, then why did God choose Jacob to be his, chosen people to represent Israel? Like, why? I guess I just don't understand why God would choose somebody who has not just one or two wives, but also each wife has a concubine of them of each other's that Jacob can also sleep with. I don't understand.
Find yourself a perfect person. You're going to have a hard time doing it in any period in history to find somebody who's perfect. That's why every messenger for God before and after his own son is an imperfect vessel, because you don't have perfect people in the world. You just don't.
Did God say, hey, Jacob, dude, I'm going to pick you as Israel, but maybe you shouldn't have 4 bitches to fuck?
Well, he wrestled with God. He literally wrestled with God. So I think we have Jacob here clearly had a lot of conflicts with God, and Israel did wrong many times against God. But I think when we get in here, we have several things. We have number one, when you're talking about the vengeance against the Midianites, I believe that was the Midianites they got vengeance against. We have here a clear separation, a clear break between the Old and the New Testament. Because we have Christ saying that all the laws that he has not reaffirmed, he condemns. So we have Christ saying we're laying down a new covenant here, and that is why he bleeds and dies on the cross, is to restore the covenant, to earn the grace of God. There will be no more sacrifice. I mean, there's a reason that Christians don't sacrifice lambs anymore. It's because there was the ultimate sacrifice paid by the Lord Jesus Christ. So, but back to the main topic, morality. When you have morality of a sort, if morality is determined by society, back to what I was saying before, if I was a 12-year-old in Nazi-occupied Austria, the morality of the time, the morality of the state and of the society says that I should turn people in whom the state deems are outlaws and thieves.
Yeah, but it seems to me like the entire rest of the world was like, hey, that shit ain't cool, Hitler. I mean, it seems to me like, yes, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say the popular opinion rules. But I mean, when you're in a society and that society has deemed something to be good or bad, you're in that society. So at that time, yeah, that was in their particular eyes, that would have been seen as good, bad, whatever. But as far as extrapolating out from that to the world stage, we collectively said, hey, this ain't cool for y'all to do. And then we kind of had a really big war over that, right?
Of course we did. Because we knew it was immoral.
Well, we knew it was immoral, but also at the same time, I mean, we can't really point to God when Hitler was also pointing to God. Like, I mean,
Hitler was not a Christian. We know that Hitler was not a Christian.
No, Hitler was definitely religious. I mean, he might not be your type of Christian.
He was a pagan.
No. I sincerely doubt he was a pagan. In numerous of his speeches, he calls to the God of the Bible. He talks about Jesus Christ.
Honest in their speeches, but we have things from Hitler behind closed doors. Specifically, in the dying days of World War II, we have him yelling at his generals, "The gods of war only give their love to those who demand the impossible." The gods. The gods, and we have him talk several private conversations.
Is this coming from
Heinrich Himmler?
Is this coming from Hitler's table talk?
No, this is coming from the radio operators and the reports that they gave to the Allies after the war.
Okay, well, I would need to see a citation on this, but in any case, it does not explain why Gott mit uns was on the Nazi soldiers' belts.
That had been the motto of the Imperial German Army too. That is a German. "God is with us" is a very old phrase that does not progenate with the Nazi Party.
Well, no, I wasn't saying that. I was just saying that there definitely was a hint of religiosity in there. I mean, Hitler was definitely friends with the Catholic Church. But in any case, my point is that morality is subjective. We all determine our own individual moral codes. And it's always been that way, even within any religious order. It doesn't really matter. See, here's the thing, is that I never use Hitler as an argument against Christian morality, right? Hitler's always brought up against subjective morality, because then you say, oh, well, then that means Hitler did nothing wrong. And that's just simply not true, because I can judge other people's moral actions against my own moral foundation. We all do that. Just because we all nowadays seem to have a very similar moral foundation does not mean that moral foundation is grounded in something supernatural, like God.
Regardless, because you grew up in the United States, because your parents, I assume, grew up in the United States or Europe, we have there the morality, the basic morality of both of what we think being founded in Western Christian thought.
No. I mean, I would say that most of what we would consider our moral foundation today is actually very biblical. I mean, like you mentioned earlier about Exodus 2015, or not 2015, but 2013, where it says, "You shall not murder." Not kill, but murder. And specifically what the context of that is you shall not murder your fellow person, like your fellow man. That would be the person within your society. God's perfectly fine with you, killing people outside of the society. In fact, he even commands that they go and kill people outside the society that worships other gods and all this other stuff.
Once again, we have the New Testament contradicting that.
Well,
we have Jesus laying down a new covenant, explicitly saying that now we are on to a new chapter, a new page, and God is a God of grace and mercy and love. We have a clear dichotomy between there, and we have Jesus explaining why. He's saying, because this is the way it is now. I repeal all these laws. I am his son. Let me do this. You now have mercy.
Let's let Mr. Gleason give his response, and then I have a question for both of you guys after he responds. So
okay,
go ahead.
All right. Well, I'll just ask one question: and do you believe that God or Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and in the future? Like, does he say the same?
Let me quote the Athanasian Creed to you: always a father, always a son. God has always been God. God has always been the blessed three in one: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Well, my point is God, Jesus, however you want to define it. I'm not sure how you do it, but do you believe that God is the same in the past as he is today and as he will be in the future?
So God
is God unchanging?
God was, is, and will be in the same form. He is Trinitarian in nature.
Okay, so you believe that he's unchanging?
God is consistently the three. Yes, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Are we talking about modalism here? Are we talking about something else?
No, God is unchanging, as in God's demeanor, God's behavior, and everything like that is unchanging throughout time.
Well, what we have here is we have God in three persons. So we have the Word of God, the Logos, which is Jesus Christ. We have the God, the Father, and we have the Holy Spirit. So a common belief in Christianity, and this is interesting, and I'm not entirely sure about this, but I've heard some people say that in the beginning, we have the governance of God the Creator. From the New Testament forward, we have the governance of the Logos. And in the future, when finally heaven comes to earth, we'll have the governance of the Holy Spirit. So we have three in one.
Okay.
Unity.
Yeah, but I guess my question is what about God's behavior? Is God's behavior?
So we have the behavior of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They definitely vary, but they're not all the same. Because we have God the Creator who creates, God the Word who speaks, and
see, that's a little confusing to me, because the only according to Christianity, God created everything through Jesus.
Yes.
Okay.
That doesn't conflict with anything that I have said. The Word spoke and the Creator created. That doesn't conflict with anything. It's through Jesus, because Jesus is the Word. So it's through that, yes. I ordered a pizza. Through my words, a pizza has been ordered. I've just predified it up to sound different. That's the same.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, should I assume that you think that God's behavior is the same throughout time? Like he has the same demeanor. So the God that ordered the Israelites to go and kill all of the Midianites and take the young virgin girls for their sexual pleasure, that's the same God as the one in the New Testament.
So I think this is interesting here because we do have a different situation back then, definitely a different situation before the New Covenant, where the Israelite nation would be destroyed if it did not. We also have to remember here that that humans back then in the biblical times, it was different. There were different according to the Christian worldview, if you really get into it, there were different types of humans. Not all of them were what we would recognize as humans. Some of them were giants. Some of them were different forms of things. And so I think we use that term loosely. Like we know that Canaanites biblically are much different. We have that a theme proceeding through Western Christian thought, because we have in Beowulf, we have a monster that roams around that is a Canaanite, and it is different than a human. It's more similar to like a Bigfoot or something like that. So I think when you're compartmentalizing them and thinking them as humans of we think today, there are all sorts of different things. There is a lot of nuance and diverse. And I think just looking at it like, well, God said this and I think this bad, therefore God bad, is not a very sound process. So we have, I don't know, what verse are you specifically citing? You were citing the Midianites?
The Numbers 31.
So you were citing Numbers 31. So I mean, exegesis can be performed on Numbers 31. So the Lord God spoke to Moses, and it says, "Avenge the children of Israel of the Midianites. Afterwards shall thou gathered unto thy people." So he's arm some of yourselves for war. Avenge the Lord of Midian. And so he tells them how they should battle the Midianites. He tells them they should battle the kings of the Midianites. And actually, we don't actually have that in the authorized King James Version.
What?
It just says that they shall be, it just implies they shall be removed from the lands. It says they shall be taken as captives.
Oh, 17 and 18.
So you have 17 and 18.
31, 17 through 18.
So when we have verses 17 and 18, well, what we have, it doesn't say rape them. It says keep them alive for yourselves.
It says take them as spoils.
I don't have that. I mean, we're probably functioning off of two different versions again, but regardless, I do not believe in the changing nature of God, but I do believe that God looked upon humanity with pity. I think God pities humanity. A perfect being pities us. I'm quite glad that that's the case.
So Numbers 31:17. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. Why would that be important? Like, why would that distinction be important? If I tell you to go and capture all of the virgins in there, what would be the point in me pointing out that they've never touched a dick?
So I think that has to do with, I think trivializing it to that point is different. I think what we have here is God just commanding the Israelites that they need to make more Israelites. We have God asking for the Midianites, who, for all we know, because they're not around anymore, I told you could have been that savage race of sons of Cain, of Canaanites that I explained to you before, Moabites, because we do have specifically, we know that Esau, for example, we know Esau was covered in hair. So these were different types of humans. This is near the beginning of creation. So everything was a lot different and more topsy-turvy than we'd consider it. But we're getting back off the thing again. So
yeah. All right. Yeah. Let me give you my question. All right.
Okay.
So my question is, do you guys think it is important for children in schooling to be taught like a comprehensive overview of all the major religions?
Do you want to go first, Gabriel?
Sure, I'll go first. I was taught in school all the major world religions. I think that it is important that we have an understanding of different cultures and different societies. I think that it's also important that we find one common strand throughout all cultures and societies is the presence of religion. Now, it takes many different forms. In the East, we have a highlighting of more of the natures of the Holy Spirit. In India, we have I actually do really enjoy studying Indian religion. I'm glad I got to do that. I think studying all sorts of religion is very important because India has a uniquely, their highest three gods have a uniquely Trinitarian structure, which is very similar to Christianity, considering one of them, Krishna, is actually just a reincarnation, or not just, but is a reincarnation of Vishnu. And the next reincarnation of Vishnu, according to Hinduism, will come back during the apocalypse, which is, again, very similar to Christianity. So I like studying world religions because we can find so many parallels and so many validations of the existence of God throughout all different cultures and societies and religions. So I think it's very cool. So I would say it is very important that we teach the next generation about the history of religion and about different religions across the world. So I'd say yes, absolutely.
I think that it would be a good idea as like an elective in a high school setting, a setting where, the kids have a little bit more sense about themselves, and they can make the decision for themselves whether or not they want to take it. I don't think that anybody younger than probably 10th grade should really be, investing a lot of time, at least in school. Studying religions. I think that is something that is that can be very beneficial later on in your scholastic career. Given the appropriate time and place and context, I think that it can be beneficial.
I think we pretty much agree on that because I obviously don't think it should be like introduced at the earliest point. There, obviously, we got to get shapes out of the way first. But I think, going into high school, absolutely. Maybe sometimes in middle school. I think you can cover probably the three biggest in middle school if you wanted to, just Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. I think it's important before you get into high school. I think it's important for you to be aware of other religions just across the world, because I think that would promote, in all honesty, tolerant thinking. Because if something is completely foreign to you by the time you get past a certain threshold of your development, your mind automatically goes, "Ooh, what's that?" I don't like that. It's so I think it's important to get it in sort of there early, but I think expansiveness, like Mr. Gleason mentioned, is important later. But just a general touching on at the beginning is fine, because you got to make sure they know about it. So when they run into somebody of that religion, they don't go, what's that thing on your head, or like, why do you dress like that? It's like, okay, we should have done something sooner about that.
Yeah, I have also another question for Mr. Gleason. Do you believe that religion causes more conflict than it solves?
I think it depends on at what point in history you're talking about, because I think in the past it's definitely been a very, very widespread point of conflict between people. I mean, if you just look at the vast differences between Protestantism and Catholicism, and the role that's played in our history, you can see how religion has been a pretty deadly disagreement that's happened in the past. As far as modern times, I don't think it's as much as it has been in the past, but I think that there's still a point of contention. But it's really not a point of contention between like atheists or secular people and religious people. I see. Not to say that there's not, but I see a lot more contention between religious people themselves as a point of contention, oftentimes to the point of violence. And so, yeah, I think it depends on the context. In modern times, I don't think it's as much, but I still think that there's it can get quite violent and deadly on occasion.
So, I mean, I think religion, I mean, if I could respond to that too, I think religion has been an enormous positive for the world. I mean, we have to remember that the two deadliest wars in all of human history were not over religion, but we have World War II and the conquest of Genghis Khan. Neither were for religion, both were about resources. So religion has created lots of things that are great. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, we had the church authorities start to have to invest in local hospitals and schools and the paving of roads and things like that. We have many religious orphanages. We have countless religious charities and such that do their best and provide some of the largest charitable contributions in our country, like the Salvation Army and things like that. So I would say religion promotes a sense of community that cannot be found anywhere else. And when you have the decline of religion, religiosity, such as in the United States, we also have this decline of community. We have this decline of community and brotherhood. We have this absolute moral decline. And we see that communities in the United States that have been through a lot of tough things, like the African-American communities and the Jewish communities, are both tightly wound that if they are in a religious community. I mean, we know no stronger religious institution in our dear old country than the Christianity of African-Americans, the AME. Because it has been through so much tumult and strife that has bound its members through this, unexplainable bond, which is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And it's really a beautiful thing, I think, we see in our society. But we need more of it, I would argue.
I think that the history of the Catholic Church can offset a good bit of the positives that you could pull out of Christianity. Now, I think that Christian people, Christian individuals can definitely do good, but I really don't think that a decline in religiosity means a decline in the moral fiber of a community. I don't see that at all.
Well, not necessarily the moral fiber, if their morality is still based off of that, which the grand majority of it is, but I think that community is an incredible thing that comes along with religion. Soup kitchens, orphanages, all those things were spearheaded originally by either Catholic or Protestant churches. I understand that the history of the Catholic Church is a long and complicated one, but there are many extra biblical things adopted by the Catholic Church of the modern day. And back then when they had, we explicitly know that you're not supposed to bribe people. It says so in the Bible. We're not supposed to have bribery and we're not supposed to have corruption, but the Borgia popes and the popes who were bad, and up into the modern day popes who cover up things, lying is a sin. So when we have you trying to cover up saying that's a lie, you're being anti-biblical, you're going against the Bible. So I'm not a Catholic, so I do not believe in the infallibility of a priesthood. I don't think that there are people who are closer to God than others. I think the Bible pretty much establishes how that whole thing goes. But corruption and lying in an institution are different from the religion itself being bad. Because even though I am not a Catholic, the Catholic Church in and of itself, minus the people, is good. Any institution minus the people is 100% good, because it is we humans who are naturally flawed and who are sinful.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, in the Old Testament, God lays down over 600 laws, and not one of them was don't diddle little boys and girls. And it seems to me like if God was omniscient and all-knowing, it kind of seems like he would have made that one of his top 10, considering that the major church for hundreds and hundreds of years diddled countless of little boys and girls. So it kind of seems to me like he would be like, hey, you know what? This is really going to be bad. Maybe I should nip it in the bud.
It's actually in there. It might surprise you because a lot of the verses that were changed in the 40s. Now, the word homosexual didn't appear in many versions of the Bible until the 1940s, because before those verses were specifying about pederasty. We're specifying, no, don't touch children. Don't do that. No pederasty. No pederasty. We have it confirmed later by the church fathers who were friends with the disciples. We have it laid out again in very clear terms in the Didache. When I was reading through it, it says, no, we're not going to have pederasty. We shall not be like the sinful Romans and Greeks. You shall not touch children. You shall not violate the sanctimony. We shall not violate the purity and the sinlessness that is children. So God specifies that several times, and then the students of the disciples specify it afterwards. So I think that there is a very clear line there.
In Leviticus 20:13, I think is maybe what you're referencing. I mean, so you've either got to say that this is talking about homosexuality, or you're admitting that they're saying that you should kill small children for being raped. Like, I don't know. I feel like you've got to. It's either one or the other. Homosexuals got to be killed, or small children have to be killed.
So I was not referring to that specifically in Leviticus. I'm referring when we have exegetes who know far more than you or I ever could, because they spent their entire lives, at the old grindstone, and we have exegesis around this saying this is not what this is saying, or actually not this is not what it's saying, because they had it in the Aramaic and the Greek, and so they could read it. And they understood that this was talking about pederasty, because there are writings at the time that we know it is about pederasty. The Bible, especially the New Testament, is, older than people think it is. The first version of Matthew was crafted around 35 AD, just about the death of, just around the death of Christ. I say this.
That's actually wrong.
That's not wrong, actually. This is a newer development. We have among the book of, they discovered a copy of a fourth generation copy of the book of John, all right? The fourth generation copy of the book of John. And attached to it is a note that is dated around 95 AD. And we know because it is a fourth generation copy, and they found more versions and more versions and more versions, and we now have it being able to date back Matthew back to 35 AD. Additionally, we also know from Paul's letters, because the book of Acts does not actually mention the death of Paul. And Paul died at around 70 something AD. And that's a pretty important event in someone's life, meaning we have to have Acts finished before Paul's death. So we have some very important dates there. Yes.
No. You're totally wrong about your whole idea of the history of the New Testament. You see, Mark wasn't written until the 70s, and then Matthew copies Mark, so he wasn't writing until the 80s. Luke, no, it's not. Luke was actually written after Matthew, because Luke uses both Matthew and Mark to write his, along with other people like Josephus and like the Odyssey, stuff like that, in order to give both Luke and Acts some historical color, historical background. John actually wasn't written until the 2nd century. So, I get that you're getting your apologetics from people that have really bad grips on history, but I can assure you that Mark... No, not. It wouldn't be. No, not archaeologists. Paul was writing in the 50s, and yes, he does die between 60 and 70 sometime. But also, you don't have to have Acts being completed by the time that Paul dies. I mean, you realize that you can write stuff down after somebody dies, and you can fit it within a particular time frame that you want it to fit in, right? Like, I mean, it. I do not see a very compelling case to date Matthew to 35. That's an extremely early date that only apologists, deeply indoctrinated apologists would cling to.
That's a little bit of a different debate, but I would contend that it's early. We do know, even Bart Ehrman capitulates that when you have that none of the major none of the errors that he finds in the Bible affect major Christian belief that much at all.
Well, I mean, that's because the main points of Christian belief were already solidified by the time the Gospels were being written. So,
you do have an you have an Aramaic hymn that dates to around the death of Jesus that pretty much codifies what is, or that not codifies, what it supports what is, and I couldn't recite the hymn to you. I don't speak Aramaic, nor do I sing that well, but we do have hymns and we have other things that come that early that we know that are around there, but that's a little off the beaten path to where we were. We were talking about society a little earlier. We go on tangents quite a bit, it seems.
I have a question for you. Do you believe that religions encourage gender equality?
Are you talking to me or
to Gabe? Okay.
So we have here, the Bible explains, the Bible does not say men and women are exactly the same, because men and women aren't exactly the same. The Bible says that men shall be glorified in what they do best and women shall be glorified in what they do best. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's not saying that one's necessarily subservient to the other. I think what we have here is, but other religions, I'm not an expert on other religions. I couldn't tell you everything that the Quran or the Vedas or Shintoism or anything else says, or shamanism, any type of animism. But I do know for Christianity, we have shall be glorified in either of their posts. And I think that men should be required to do, I think it's polite to hold the door open for women. I think it's polite to help, I think it's polite to help people. I think if you go on a date with a woman, you should pick up the tab. Is that subservience? I don't think that's a woman being subservient. But I think there are different ways that each gender specializes in. I wouldn't say that makes them unequal, though. Not at all.
Yeah, I definitely think. Well, as far as like Christianity goes, I think that it very much puts women on a lower level than men. It's plainly laid out. In the Bible that women are definitely subservient to men. It starts right out in Genesis saying that. So I don't think that the Bible or Christianity really promotes gender equality. I think that's very anti-gender equality. I would think that any religion that is an Abrahamic religion, which would include like Islam and Judaism, both of those would also not support gender equality whatsoever.
We have Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek nor slave nor free. There is no male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. We have that from the New Testament. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man nor man of woman. So I would say that Christianity is pretty hunky-dory on the issue, not to coin a phrase, to quote a phrase. Other religions, as I said, can't defend them, don't know enough about their laws. I know Islam certainly has a different view. I've heard, this is interesting, I'd actually like to get your reaction to this, Mr. Gleason, is that some sources in the Middle East actually claim that women there are, to a sense, more liberated because societal pressures don't force them to dress in scant clothing. So I've heard that before. I don't necessarily think that's a good argument. I would rather get your opinion on it, but it's certainly an argument. It certainly exists. What society forces women to dress scantily clad and stuff? So the argument from this cleric, Islamic cleric, was that in Western society, societal expectations force women in certain areas to dress in a way that appeals to men. Versus their, so-called, liberating law, which allows women to be free of the gazes of men, which I didn't agree with, and I don't think you do either.
No, I don't see anybody being forced to dress a certain way. So I guess we could get into more of the nuances of sexism in the workplace and sexism in different venues in at least American culture. But as far as the way that person's contextualizing it, I don't think that actually happens. Also, the women that do dress like that are wanting to dress like that. But then again, there's nuances to that particular discussion, and I'm just talking in a very general kind of way.
Absolutely. You know, as I said, not an expert on Islam, not an expert on Hinduism, so I can't necessarily speak to that, but I can speak to Galatians 3:28 that says, there's no male, there's no female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Colin, if you're saying, oh, there you go, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Do you think, this is to Mr. Gleason, do you think that the Ten Commandments are flawed?
Well, I mean, definitely, I think that they're flawed. I think that, the fact that the first 4 commandments are talking about, God and being very self-servient to God, I think that that's pretty wasted space. Like I said before, given that God is supposed to be omniscient and all-knowing, you would think that he would have, freed up one of those spots to say, hey, this is going to be a problem in the future. So I want to say it's very specifically, without any kind of shroud of contextualization, don't diddle little children. Like I feel like
times.
See, I disagree with you on that. I think that it should have been a lot more specific in the first 10 commandments. There's a lot of things that he could have said other than exactly how to stroke his dick. So
these 10 commandments were given to the Israelites, very specifically to the Israelites, and he had a different set of rules for non-Israelites, and there are more rules. But what we have here from Corinthians 13:13 is pretty dang specific and says, let's go to the version now. I'll go back to the King James. And now abideth faith, hope, charity. These 3, but the greatest is charity, charity or love. It says in the little footnote. And so it says faith, hope, and love. I don't think Mr. Gleason or anyone else would find themselves an opponent of any of those things. Faith, hope, and love. Faith in I don't think so. Love is a good thing. Faith is a good thing. Hope is a good thing. All these are good things.
Well, I mean, I don't know about faith. I think it depends on the context and the faith. But I mean, if the 10 Commandments doesn't matter now, then why is there such a movement to try to put the 10 Commandments up in children's classrooms as well as courthouses?
So I've not seen a movement to put. I've seen a movement to defend. I've seen a movement to defend, saying, okay, don't take these down. They're here. They're nice. They're a good reminder of one of the original laws that the Lord laid down. And here they are. I don't think
if they don't, I mean, if they don't matter past the Israelite. Well, I mean, if they were only specifically written for the Israelite, society, why do they matter here? Well, why does it matter now, like these 10 commandments?
Because the 10 commandments are still relevant and they are still important, but some of the nitty gritty was specifically given for the Israelites. Now, much of it was meant to survive the ages. Now, I think it's very good. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. I think those are pretty good universal ones that we should always keep to. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet. Honor your father and your mother. Here we are. We're more than half of them now. And I don't think you or many people would see anything super objectionable in those.
Oh, I definitely object to the respect your father and your mother. I think that it can be very detrimental. So no, I totally disagree with that one. Don't commit adultery. I think it kind of depends on what you mean by adultery there. I think that there's a little bit of a nuance to go with that. But also I would say that you don't know what's going on in somebody's relationship. I'm not saying that makes it right or okay. I'm just saying that, to codify these down into your 10 commandments from God and then want to put those up at courthouses, which there is a movement to put them up at courthouses and in classrooms. yeah, I think to do that, you either have to admit that it wasn't only written for the Israelites, or if they are only written for the Israelites, then what's the point in putting them up? That's my point.
The point of it is that what we have, the point here is, if you want to have, and people do want to have the 10 Commandments up, I don't necessarily see why there's a big hullabaloo about it, because we have our nation and its founders were, 78 of them or more were, active churchgoers. We have the foundation of our nation being rooted in Judeo-Christian principles. And what is a monument to Judeo-Christian principles? The 10 Commandments.
Name one Judeo-Christian principle that only exists within Christianity.
Well, we have the forgiveness of sins through the death of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's not in the 10 Commandments.
No, but you said a Christian principle.
Well, but that's enshrined in our laws, or in some way affects like our government, because that's what we were talking about, is our government.
Christianity. Well, if I was going to say something that's just Christianity or just Judaism, that would counteract everything I said earlier about the will of perfect morality being enshrined upon our hearts, of God putting it there, of God putting the natural law, the natural morality on our hearts. So I'm not going to say that, because it's not true, because God gave us all natural morality and the will to act good or evil.
Well, then if I just simply don't know what that means for him to write it upon our hearts. Like,
it's metaphorical. It's not literal. If I open up my chest, I'm not going to see it there. It's metaphorical. It's saying we know it's not good to kill people. Would you agree with that it's not good to kill people?
Well,
I go up to somebody and stab him and take his wallet.
No, I would agree with that, but that's because I have a mostly normally functioning brain. But if you take a look at psychopaths and sociopaths, they don't have that inclination. So where is God writing all these moral laws on our hearts when it comes to those people who seem to be devoid of normal societal norms that we have now? Like, where did God take a day off when he was creating them? Did he just forget to write the laws on their hearts? What's going on there?
Well, we actually, from the NCBI, from the official government website, we actually know that psychopaths know killing people is wrong. They know right from wrong. They just choose to ignore it.
No. See that does not. No, see that does not comport with reality, because we know that psychopaths and sociopaths do not realize that these things are wrong. Like, they've been told that they are wrong, and they can quote unquote know that they are wrong because other people have told them that they are wrong, but they do not feel as though that they are wrong because they have this chemical imbalance in their brain.
And that's different. I'd have to go through the whole article with you, which we don't have time to do, clearly. But something that I would just say is that we do have this article on, an accredited website saying, and I've seen this many times before, is that psychopaths know right from wrong, but don't care. So it's not that they don't know right from wrong. We have to get into a deep thing. We'd have to do a deep dive and interview with somebody of that disorder to figure this whole thing out, or try to wrap our heads around it, but don't care. So it's not the absence of the moral law, of knowing moral law. It's not caring. And I think that that's a big difference. It's a big difference.
But you see, I feel like that's just a misrepresentation of those particular psychological states. To act like psychopaths and sociopaths, are just deciding to, murder somebody, or not find it wrong to murder somebody, I think is woefully misinformed.
All right. I mean, it says psychopaths have a normal understanding of right and wrong, but abnormal regulation of morality, appropriate behavior.
I have no idea what you're reading from, so I can't really.
Right. That's right.
Okay.
I think we should wrap it up from here. If you guys want to have any final thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to give a whole spiel. I'll just say, it was nice having Mr. Gleason on here. We had a spirited discussion. It's been a while since I've done that. It was an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. It was awesome.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys having me here, letting me talk. And, I love having these discussions, and I know that I get, very enthusiastic, I guess, or very passionate when discussing the topic. Huh?
It goes on both parts. I know Gabe gets very enthusiastic.
Yeah. So I get very enthusiastic and passionate about these kinds of discussions. So I really appreciate you guys having me on here and allowing me to talk and stuff.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you. God bless you. God bless America. And I guess God save America at this point. And good night. It was an honor to have John Gleason here.